I felt resentful because it's like, I can't make a mistake. So I think that really carried with me, right? Because as I went into the later part of my education, I still felt that at the back of my mind, you are so-and-so's daughter. And that perhaps limited me, because then who am I?
Welcome to the Speaking Human podcast with Dr. Damini. Speaking Human is a storytelling podcast where each episode traces how voices rooted in and connected to Asia first learned to communicate, from childhood dynamics through key turning points to the way they use their voice today. The goal is to explore how communication shapes who we are and to make honesty, vulnerability, and courage culturally aspirational. It is not a show about polished public speaking tips. It's about the messy, vulnerable, and often invisible ways we learn to speak to ourselves, to others, and to the world. The Speaking Human platform is founded on a simple belief: clarity in voice, courage in connection, humanity in every conversation. In the studio with me today is Sha-En Yeo. Sha-En is Singapore's only happiness scientist. She is a speaker, facilitator, and founder whose work explores emotional well-being, fulfillment, and what it means to live meaningfully in high-performance environments. Through her work across organizations, leadership spaces, and human-centered conversations, she has spent years helping people better understand the relationship between success, identity, emotional health, and the ways we communicate with ourselves and others. But today's conversation, Sha-En, isn't really about happiness in the polished sense because, we like to stir trouble. It's about the hidden communication patterns many high-achieving people develop in order to survive, succeed, and belong, and what parts of themselves quietly disappear in the process. So Sha-En, welcome to Speaking Human. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
We've been waiting for this, haven't we?
Yes.
So we'll jump straight in. So I like to start every episode kind of at the beginning of your story first, right? Let's talk a little bit about little Sha-En. So tell me about, the time when you were born, what family structure looked like, and what communication really looked like in the early stages.
I mean, my earliest memories, I guess, were maybe 4 or 5. And I'm living in a fairly big house. My dad was a professor in literature. My mom was a money broker. And you can imagine how different those two occupations are already. I'm the second child as well. And I think the early days, my dad being a lit professor and a writer, it was filled with a lot of poetry. Yeah, and he would, over holidays, while kids go out to play, and not that I didn't play at all, but we would do recitations of his poems. Yeah, that was what my holidays were about. And when we would go on holiday, we would write holiday reviews, or read books, we would write book reviews. So those were some of the early memories in terms of, say, language and communication. And then, of course, my mom, being a money broker, was very straight talking, very direct. So you can imagine I have the flowery and the very direct, all growing up in the same environment.
So with that, and with the dichotomy of the two very distinct styles, what was rewarded, do you feel, growing up? Was it keeping the harmony? Was it honesty? Was it achievement? Were there specific prescribed things that you were expected to say when you were writing the review or reciting the poetry? Was it a right way to do things, or did you have the freedom to do it your way?
Writing the reviews, we always had the freedom. In fact, my dad's a very, for expression, right? Say everything. But of course, we were corrected on things like good use of vocabulary and grammar, structure, of course, because that's what he was teaching teachers and, in his profession. And with my mom, I think it was never about the writing. It was always about the talking, about the ambition. I love to talk ever since I was young. And she would always say, and perhaps this is very normal for an Asian family, it's like, you talk so much, you argue so well, you should become a lawyer.
Be a lawyer.
Oh yeah. And at age 6, that was cemented in my mind. I am going to be that lawyer. And I'm going to speak and argue my way through life.
So what happened?
I actually got into law school.
Yeah.
I did. I applied, and I remember the interview. And they asked me about some regulation, which I had no idea. I made it up and I got through. But but I had also spent a year before that interview in a lawyer's office thinking that, I might as well get to know the environment. And when I was there, I was kind of like the PA. And I remember working for this lawyer who had 2 children at the time. Her husband was also a lawyer in the same law firm on a different floor, but they never spoke. I never saw him. She never left the office for lunch except for meetings. And I thought to myself, I don't think this is the life that I want to have. And so even though I got into law school, I turned it down.
Ooh. And how did that decision go down?
Honestly, I don't remember how, but all I know is that perhaps my mom was disappointed because that was what she had always wanted. But at the same time, I think my dad always wanted me to do what I wanted to do. Yeah, not that I really knew what it was besides law. Yeah, and I just remember being so captivated by observing people, wondering what's going on in people's minds. And so that's when psychology actually came up.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So let's rewind just a little bit, right? Because we've kind of skipped a whole phase of your life.
A whole chunk.
Yeah. We've skipped over too much. I want to just go back because obviously your mum and dad, like you said, had very different expectations or like different things that they valued.
Yes.
And hence the expectations on you from either of them would have been a little bit different, right? Where did you develop your sense of self, and at what point did you learn like what it meant to be acceptable, or like where did you look for the signals from the world around you for, okay, I'm on the right path?
Yeah. When I was in primary school, because my dad was an English professor as well, and at the time teaching teachers, it was a very small community. And so being his daughter, it was not Sha-En me, it was being his daughter. I would go to school and during English lesson, they would ask me to answer a lot of the questions. And when tests came, they would say, "You sure going to get full marks because your father is so and so." I felt resentful because it's like, I can't make a mistake for English anyway, right? So I think that really carried with me, right? Because I as I went into the later part of my education, I still felt that at the back of my mind, you are so-and-so's daughter. And that perhaps limited me because then who am I? I don't really know when I got that sense of self. Perhaps it was being in secondary school in a very highly competitive top girl school. Won't name the name, everyone knows what it is. And feeling like I'm struggling because I had also gotten in there through the network of my father. So it was just one thing after another.
So this is a really interesting piece, right? Because I feel like I experienced something similar, and there's a lot of other high achieving people that I know that have experienced similar feelings of, I have to be perfect and I can't afford to make a mistake. And it's for various different reasons. So in your case, it was because of the identity of who your dad was, right? For me, it was because of my childhood and the circumstances. There was this idea that like I couldn't afford to make a mistake because it would reflect badly on my mum, right? So I think for so many different reasons, there's so many people in our generation, in our circles that have experienced some form of this.
Yes.
From a psychological standpoint, right? What do you see in the work that you do in how this plays out in patterns into adulthood?
Yeah, perfectionism is obviously the thing that I see a lot. People are carrying stories from the past that they have to or else. And in fact, talking about my mom, one of the earliest memories was her putting a result chart on one of our whiteboards tied to monetary value.
Oh, wow.
So 100 marks, $50. And then it would just go down. And I remember looking at it. I never hit that 100 except for English because yes, But I remember thinking, gosh, I want to get that $50, but I don't think I can get there. So what was meant to be motivating, to me, it was not. It was a huge pressure. Yeah, and I never actually thought I could do well in school. Yeah, I eventually did. There was a turnaround somewhere in
So what was the
secondary
turnaround?
It was a teacher who believed in me. And she didn't talk to me like, if you do this, then you get that. That very if-then kind of approach. It was like, hey, you're not good in this. Let me support you. Let me take you one step further. So coming back to perfectionism, if you look at it from the psychological lens, perfectionism starts from a feeling that you're not good enough and you will never be. And it carries a very deep shame, right? But with that teacher, she didn't want to make me into something. She just said, I'm going to sit with you and we'll take it step by step. So it was beyond the grade. She saw me, the person who needed comfort. Needed to believe in herself.
And how does this translate then to the workplace? Right? Because we see this pattern repeated over and over again, right?
Yes.
And you see two ends of the spectrum, because you see the people who say, I need to achieve perfectionism and I'm not going to stop no matter what.
Yes.
And I'm going to push and push and push till I hit burnout and then I'll crash, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the people that say, I need to achieve perfectionism, but I'm never going to achieve it. So why bother trying? So I'll just do the bare minimum to keep my job and get paid.
Yeah.
And what can we be doing to help both ends of the spectrum? And whose responsibility is it?
True. I mean, there are distinctions.
Yeah.
So perfectionism is pushing at all costs, right? And then there's excellence, which is becoming a better version of the version you were before. And sometimes people conflate the two. Right? Perfectionism, as we say, is driven by shame. Excellence is driven by what I would believe is optimism and hope that I can get better, a growth mindset, right? And the people who look and say, might as well don't try. This draws back to a theory called learned helplessness. If I keep trying and never get those results, I now carry this story that it will never be mine. And so might as well just get used to it, a sense of resignation. And again, resignation is different from acceptance, that perhaps at this point there's limits to what I can do, but that does not constrain me. In fact, knowing those limits allows me to make certain choices about how I want to move forward towards excellence. Right?
And then I suppose then that piece of excellence or achieving those goals or not getting to the point of learned resignation is really setting sensible goals as well, right? Because if you continue to set yourself up, so it was very interesting. I went on Monday actually to go see a psychiatrist because I thought, you know what, I feel like more and more that I have a lot of symptoms of ADHD. And if I get tested and there's something that can help me optimize the way that I function, the knowledge will help me. And so I went there and he asked me all these questions. And then at the end he said to me, he said, look, you're probably not going to be very happy with what I have to tell you, but you are just a high achieving person who's holding yourself to a standard that is ridiculous. And you need to start basically getting a bit of a reality check on how you're measuring your success because you don't have ADHD. You're just doing too much and you're holding yourself to a standard. So I guess this goal setting piece tied to excellence, right? What does that look like? And I want to bring in here now just a little bit of the Asian lens, right? Because we have, I feel, as a culture, certain ways of assessing and measuring success and excellence, right? Talk to me a little bit about your experience with that.
Success. So I was also a badminton player and I played for school since primary 5. So since 10 all the way to I graduated uni at 22. I was this high achieving, I got a scholarship, I just go. And to me, success is just getting better and better and hitting all those so-called milestones. At first it was set by my parents, I guess. In some way, it's like you need to get this, right? In order to look a certain way. And then along the way, I internalized that. It became mine, right? And of course, part of that was driven by wanting to be the good daughter that made them proud, right? And I think that's very Asian, maybe. And I wanted to make them proud because my parents were fighting all the time and my sister had left the house. And I thought maybe the best way to keep the family together was to achieve. Because if I achieve, they have nothing to fight about. If I get a scholarship, they got no money to pay. Right?
And were you right? Or did they find other things to fight about?
They found other things to fight about, right? And then, well, so I went overseas for 3 years, super, super fun. But that was when I started to unpack and unlearn this sense of achievement, right? My classmates would say, hey, Sha-En, do you want to go Hampstead Heath and eat pancakes? The Sha-En now is like, absolutely, right? Like, no question. Why do you even need to ask? But at the time, I was like, don't you guys have papers to write? Don't we need to go to the library? Because that was my life. And then but I could feel that yearning in my heart was like, I'm here. Nobody's telling me what to do. But yet those voices in my head of the story of the person I'm supposed to be, a scholar who must get good grades in order to keep my scholarship, was here because my parents think so highly of me. Can I actually go to Hampstead? You know?
But you had the education and the knowledge and the ability and the self-awareness.
I don't know if I had that.
Right? Yeah, okay. Or you developed
at that time,
right?
Yeah,
you developed it. But there's so many people that don't, right? They don't have the benefit of the education, of the understanding of human psychology, who truly live their entire lives in the person that I was supposed to be, right? This identity of this person that they're supposed to be. What point in your life, and like, I mean, you know, there's obviously so many different schools of psychology around the development of self.
Yeah.
But at what point do you feel like that sense of this is the person I'm supposed to be gets cemented in a person?
Wow. I would say London was the time when I allowed myself to explore that part of me. So I did eventually go and eat the pancakes.
So how old were you then?
I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did allow myself to go to Hampstead. And I remember walking the grounds and feeling so light and free. And that was when I started to question that narrative that success must be drill, 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 drain yourself, hard work, get good grades.
So did you feel any guilt at all when you went to Hampstead and ate the pancakes?
Definitely. It was always there. Yeah. It was always there. Like, shouldn't you be at home studying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But honestly, there wasn't a lot to study. So then what am I supposed to do with my time? But I had packed my days when I was in high school. I packed it to the brim. Badminton school team, right? Straight A student. So you can imagine, right? And so when I was there, I had so much free time. And that was when I started to ask, hey, where did this come from? Why am I like this? Right? And the more I put myself to do something different from what was, like weekend trips, taking a budget airline to go to a part of Europe I have never been before with my friends, and coming back and realizing, wow, that's life.
Oh yeah, and like my life didn't fall apart because I had some fun.
Yeah. And of course, I must give a little bit credit to that hard work, right? Because I knew that even if I had one day to finish my assignment, I would get it done because I know I could. And so that gave me the freedom actually to play. I don't know what play was before that. Play is play badminton.
Yeah. It has to be achievement,
yes,
right?
It has to be tied to a goal and an achievement. This one was just play for play's sake. Exploration, no plan, never mind, right?
So this is a big one, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like play, especially in a Singapore context, is something that people put on the back burner, or they don't do it enough, or, you know, we joke because often like when you ask people, not just Singapore, but in Asia in general, but specifically Singapore, that you ask them like, oh, what do you do in your free time? And they'll either say, I sleep or I play video games, right? Those are like the two things. And you're like, surely that can't be it. Like, and even the video game is tied to an outcome, right?
Yes.
It's not just, it's like achieving the next level and moving to the next thing. It's not as simple as just, I'm playing.
Yeah, it's measurable, it's tangible.
Yeah,
you feel that success is that, right? It's productive, it's valuable, all of those words.
Yeah. So what is it about Asian culture that makes us so resistant to play?
When you have lived your whole life believing that your worth is tied to how much you achieve, play feels frivolous. And you wouldn't want to be caught dead doing something frivolous, right? After all. And I think there's some generational pieces to it. After all, many of them came and landed here, right? Through sheer hard work. There was no thought of play. It was like, I need to put food, a very survival mentality. I need to put food on the table and you're going to do that. And that's how we were raised.
Yep.
And when we see them struggle, I think a part of us would think, gosh, if they struggled so hard for us to make it, then we have to maximize our life. And so we maximize our life, but we didn't come from that generation. Hence, we ended up burning out and start questioning, so is that all to life? And in fact, when we first start to play, it feels almost dangerous because that's not our norm. And that is why it's so much resistance, because our whole nervous system has associated, right, play with almost feeling like a threat. You're not useful. You're not valuable. Nobody cares about that. You can't make money doing that, right? And so we say, oh yeah, I might as well listen to that.
So what is shifting? You're so right? Because I obviously identify with everything that you've said. So what is shifting with Gen Z and then Gen Alpha? Because they don't also buy into those patterns at all. So what's the shift that you see there?
They're looking at us. I have both Gen Z and Gen A kids, by the way. And they're looking at us and they will say, aren't you working? And probably something that's forming in their mind is that I want my parents to be around. And if they're working so hard and they're not around, they start to create a longing. And that longing would drive the way that they behave. All I want is for my parents to spend some quality time with me. But if they're always working so hard, then they might start to say, maybe that's not the life that I want. I want something else, right? And they have now got the freedom to choose more than our parents ever had, freedom to choose anything that happened in their life, right? And so if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think we many people know about that. The basic needs have been met. Next is the relational needs. And then after that, that self-actualization, doing more with your life beyond the basic needs.
Is there a danger though, that like for them, that at some point there's an inflection point where they can no longer meet their basic needs because they're so focused on the play side of things?
I don't think so. Maybe I'm just too idealistic, but I think that if they know how to play and they know how to utilize their strengths and that energy and that internal motivation that comes with that, they would create something that may not look like what's happening in the world. The standard way of having a job, which is already happening, right? They want to move on after 2 years. Our generation and the generations before stayed for 40 years and retired there. And now they want, and so sometimes there's that conflict, right? We see them playing and we think they are good for nothing. But no, actually, maybe they found a new way of living. And we need to let them forgive the pun, play it out and see what they will do. And you have kids so young already making it big online because they have explored that part. They dared to question, what if life could look different? What would I do? Yeah, and I'm excited when I look at them, to be honest.
I have two places I want to go with this. I'll go to one first and then we'll come back to like parenting this situation. Okay. We'll open that can of worms in a minute. But what communication patterns do you see in a lot of high functioning, while we're talking about generations, right? I think millennials, this sense of perfectionism is very much linked to millennials. I talk about it all the time that as a generation, we're a generation of perfectionists and people pleasers. What communication patterns do you see emerging in these people as a result of how they've developed their identities and how they see themselves in the world?
So a sense of perfectionism or people pleasing, you are more often to say yes to things without actually pausing and asking whether your capacity is ready to take on everything. A lot of harmony focused actions, right? And that could mean, it's fine, no problem. The mask of fine, right? Yeah, I can do it. Or something like, it's okay. When actually inside you're like, I got to make this change, that change, in order to show up today. But no, it's okay. Right? And then you just do that thing. And then with the perfectionism, you'll tell yourself, this is the way I will get better. What's wrong with putting myself into that standard? And we self-convince
Yeah.
that it's okay to do that. So the narrative and the words we say to ourselves become this like, it's okay, whether it's people pleasing or it's perfectionism, because we are driven by that engine
Yeah.
that we're not good enough. And hence we need to do even more and even more, even more. Right. So,
but there is a shift, right, happening. And I
Yes.
feel like, the reason we're having this conversation even now is because this shift between harmony versus honesty is starting to happen, and people are starting to question, like, what am I losing, or what parts of myself am I denying in holding the peace and the harmony as opposed to honesty?
Yes.
So talk to me from a psychological standpoint on what happens in the human psychology when we're constantly keeping the harmony versus allowing ourselves to be honest.
Right.
And then also on the flip side, what is the cost of honesty?
When you're always keeping the peace, you are doing a lot of suppression. So emotional suppression is where you feel something, but you're not getting it out, right? A healthy system thrives on healthy self-expression. But if someone asks you to do XYZ, you don't actually want to do it, but you're like, I'm okay, I'm going to do it. Your whole body is saying yes, but actually internally, right, the body is holding a no. So it gets very tight, right? And the message you're sending to yourself is what you want, what you need, what you feel is unimportant. Stuff it back right down. And so you stuff it down, but then where does it go? Right? And so the cost of that is very high. First of all, you start to have physical issues. Besides burnout, migraine. For women, a lot of issues around the female parts that stuck down there. Psychologically, you start to not believe and trust yourself. That sense of disconnection is because you don't trust yourself. And it shows up at the workplace in your communication. You will second guess yourself. You will ask 1,001 people for their opinion and still can't make up your mind because other people's words seem to matter. So that's the big cost of harmony. Honesty has other costs, and that is relational costs sometimes. But we must also question, was the relationship that is now being harmed, so to speak, by this honesty, what was it built on? If it was built on you getting approval from them, is that honesty? Is that where we really want it to be? Right? And a true test is a person who has always benefited from you saying yes to them. Suddenly you say no. Do they still stay there? Or do they say, I'm not getting the benefit from this person of being so nice to me all the time. Screw it, I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
So I find that in my own journey, when I say no more, when I express myself more, some people have left my life.
Yeah. It creates a lot of tension for people, right? Like you said, I mean, I think the minute we learn to say no or hold a boundary around something, and someone in your life is not used to you holding a boundary around it can create a lot of discomfort for them.
And communication is the way through.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm not saying it's easy, but for example, if you are changing the way that you do things, other people are not used to you showing up in that form or in that manner. And if you don't communicate it, then of course they've learned and come to expect you to be a certain way. But the bridge is communication. And that to me is something we can learn. Right? So for example, I can't come to the dinner that you have invited. I know Auntie X and Y have flown in all the way from wherever to be here, but I'm just not able to because whatever, And the way that you say it makes all the difference. See, when the narrative is I need to please, the way you say it is very wishy-washy. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry, but maybe we use a lot of tentative words. But if we are clear that this thing is just not the right thing for us at this moment, and we say it in a way that is, I can't be there, right?
Do we owe an explanation? Do we owe the explanation that, I'm sorry I can't be there, full stop, right? Or I would love to be there, but I just can't make it, full stop. is that good enough? Or do we require to explain that at this point in my life, I'm really busy and I'm holding a boundary and I need you to respect that?
Good enough for who?
Mm.
I would say it must be good enough for ourselves first. Otherwise, we are falling back into that pattern again that we now need to come up with a story to make them happy. But of course, I would say safety matters as well. Sometimes by moving to that too quickly, the safety for them and for us is not there.
Yeah.
And so there's threat all around. Everyone feels very tense. That's what the tension is, right?
Yeah.
Because they're expecting you to show up this way. You don't want to do it anymore. And then there's this hidden thing. Yeah. So sometimes we have to ask ourselves, who is the story for? And if you are telling a story, you have the opportunity to frame the story.
Yeah.
And you don't have to say, I'm sorry. Right. And of course, if you don't really love to meet that uncle, auntie that you have never met for 40 years, don't say I would love to. Like, I used to say that a lot.
Find a way to make it happen.
Right. I say, if you love to, then you must be there. And it can be very persuasive. Right. And so to me, it's always start with, if we want to learn about boundary setting, we start with low stakes conversations. Putting up the boundary when it doesn't have too much of a consequence and practice saying it steadily. You don't need to be mean, you don't need to be hurtful, but saying it with, what's the word? Gravitas, maybe. Groundedness. Like,
just owning it. Yeah. On the topic of honesty, right? One of the things that I see very often in the work that I do with companies is people in the workplace being honest, right? But in ways that don't align or don't sit well with other people, right? And they say, but I'm just being honest. I'm just calling a spade. And that's just who I am. And I'm just being authentic and real and honest in the way that the company needs because factually I'm correct, right? Where does honesty, authenticity, and the how of being honest come together?
Wow, that's a very layered question. When I talk to people about being honest, I think that there are layers to honesty, right? And if you go to work and suddenly talk about everything that happened at home when nobody asked, to me that is oversharing, right? Oversharing. And there's such a thing as being too honest and hurting other people, which I never advocate for, even if you are being yourself, right? But then again, the person will say, but that's just me being authentic. But it could also mean that they want a free pass. And in a workplace, you are not in isolation. You have other parties around you. And let's say for the first time, we give the benefit of the doubt that they had no awareness. Right? But if they've been told that, hey, this isn't really great for team dynamics, and the person continues, I would argue that they have the awareness now and they're making a choice that I want to be who I am and I don't care about other people. Right?
What if that piece is around other people's performance, right? So, this is a constant friction point, right? It's, okay, in the workplace, you're not in isolation, but you're also getting paid to do a certain job, right? And do the job to a certain standard. So if I, as your manager, have a problem with the fact that you're not performing to a standard that I expect you should be performing to, right? And I tell you that what you're doing is not good enough. But you then go and make an HR complaint and say that I'm being a bully and I'm being this and I'm being that, right? Where is that spot where the tension can exist but be productive? And how can people be productive in those environments?
There's a framework that I like to teach people. You may know about it. It's called nonviolent communication, right? And it starts with an observation. The distinction is when you start with an observation. So I noticed that you have been late to meetings multiple times. It's a fact. And please, for anyone listening, do the due diligence. You don't go to A based on hearsay of B, C, D, and E. Use the facts and use the data and you call it I notice. We start with I rather than you because you makes the person feel cornered,
Defensive.
right?
Yeah.
Defensive. So I notice this, right? And you express a need or a wish. I notice you've been late 3 times in the last 3 meetings. And I need everyone to be here so that we're all on the same page when we start the meeting, right? So notice the difference. It's not like you're always late. Have you been skiving? Look, come on, I'm going to put this down and mark you. That person's going to be like, hey, did you not notice all the other times I've been? And it just becomes this Longhorn situation. But this structure is really beautiful because it gives the person who's unhappy an opportunity to express the need that they have, as opposed to go into blaming mode. And then we end off with a question, would you be willing to blah, blah, blah. And if, let's say, you realize that the person might need some help, you can always end with a question, how can I support you?
Yep.
But notice that doesn't make you shy away from saying what needs to be said. Because people often go one of 2 ways. One is they're too nice and then they don't get it out. One is they're too mean and the person goes to HR.
Yeah.
So to me, this is a really good middle ground. And psychologically, people's defenses are down. And we must ask ourselves, what is the purpose of doing this?
Yeah.
Is the purpose to get your message across in a way that is well received and action is taken? Right? Or is it to protect your ego and just be mean?
Yeah.
And it's the same with the honesty, authenticity piece. If you already know and you're going down the honesty route no matter what, that is an ego issue. I have the right to take up this space and I don't care about you. Authenticity is that I recognize that I may be using words that it's not helpful in the work dynamic. And I'm willing to still say the same message, but in a way that is well received. And I think that, to me, there's a difference there.
Yeah. And I think this is a really great distinction for the people that do speak up and say their piece, right?
Yeah.
What about the people who really struggle to say what they really feel? Because there's a lot of those, and I think especially in Asian workplace culture, people tend to hold back a lot as well. So what is going on, again, psychologically, what is going on in their brains when they choose to just hold back and not speak up at all?
I often ask people to think to themselves, what would be the reason or the purpose why they need to speak up? And that's a really good question, because sometimes it is actually not that big a deal. And if it comes back to you multiple times, then that's when it has become that big a deal. What's holding back is not that they don't have courage, it's that there's not enough safety to bring it up. Right? And maybe for some people, it's also, who am I to say this? Who's going to listen to me? I'm just a small fry. So they've made themselves into this I'm not important narrative. And that comes back to the earlier discussion on the shame and I'm not good enough. So, and perhaps
I hear this piece all the time, right? Because, and especially with women, right? You hear them say like, oh, but what if I say something wrong? So there's the fear of judgment. There is this fear of wasting people's time. I had never heard this concept before, but like I hear it repeatedly now in the work that I do, where people are like, oh, but what if I'm wasting everybody's time by saying what I'm saying? And you're so right, because it is that safety, but it's internal safety and it's external safety, right? So you could have a psychologically safe space to speak up in, but if you're not aligned internally, you're not going to speak up. How much of communication is nervous system dependent?
Oh my goodness. Wow, so much. I mean, okay, there's an aspect of us that can fake it till you make it, and we have all done that at some point in our time, in our life. But if I go back to nervous system, right, when we are feeling unsafe, then our body responds in one of 3 ways, right? Freeze, flight, or 4 ways, right? Freeze, flight, fight, and fawn, which is the people pleasing. And so a person who is very shaky in front of a figure of authority, as for example, and dare not speak up, then they could be in one of those modes, right? And so in order to speak up and get to that internal safety that you're talking about, the nervous system has everything to do with it, right? And if they are stuck in freeze, it's going to come out, and then that person might say, come on, just get it out, spit it out. And they can't for dear life because they're like frozen, right? Or they say it in a way that is aggressive because then they're in that fight mode. Or they just don't show up. I have clients who go hide in the toilet.
No.
Yeah. And then they are late. And then because they are late, they get...
Then there's even more shame than
and then it becomes this vicious cycle of that is driven by an internalized belief. And the question I always ask is, where did this belief come from?
So what in those moments, like what can people do to regulate the nervous system in the moment if you find yourself stuck in one of those responses?
Yeah, so different things for different nervous system states. So if you're in fight or flight, we call this activated, then the strategies like breathing, right? And certain kind of breathing that's breathing through the nose, breathe out through the mouth, that will help the nervous system to be less activated into what Dan Siegel calls the window of tolerance, where you're calm, connected, and present. If you're in freeze, you are already kind of in the hypo-arousal zone, shut down. So if you do more calm breathing, then you're still there. So that's when you need to move. Movement. Walking around, talk to someone, something active in order to get out from shutdown into that same window of tolerance. So different strokes for different states.
Do you ever find yourself in any of those?
Of course.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What's your like MO? What's your what usually happens to you? Fight.
I'm the fighter.
Really?
Yeah. It doesn't look at it. But I'm a competitive badminton player. I know how to fight. Yeah. And so that's my default.
And so how does that come out in communication then for you?
Well, communication is in the body will start to feel the rising thing, and then I'll say it out and I'll glare my eyes. Yeah, I mean, it's like, is that Sha-En at all? I will say things.
I'm glad to say that I've never brought that out in you.
I will say things without mincing my words. Yeah. And it's this push, right?
Yeah.
If only I can just push through this thing, then I will show them, right? Because I also went through a period in my life where I was bullied for many years, and I was the shutdown one. I was angry inside, but the body shut down because I felt small. I didn't think much of myself at the time, right? But actually these days, I would say my default is more of the fight.
Yeah.
Right? And we can vacillate between the two.
Yeah.
There isn't only one. So,
and I think, I mean, you know, it's like you said, right? We've all been through different times and patterns. And I think a big part of what the work that I do is about building the self-awareness of those patterns, right?
Yes.
Because you can only really undo or address or change your patterns once you identify what they are.
Yes.
And I know you're doing a bit of work in the trauma-informed space now with how those patterns show up in our bodies and in our lives in other ways, right?
Yes.
You're also writing a book at the moment. Well, almost done.
Almost done. It's
done.
with the publishers now.
Yeah. Okay. So I know that your book in some ways is similar to my book in that there is a lot of personal storytelling in there. And we've talked a lot today about honesty, vulnerability, authenticity, speaking up and addressing the parts that were suppressed. Tell me a little bit about your process of writing the book and how you have found the process of balancing honesty versus getting the book out.
So the book started in COVID. I was on webinars I had thousands of webinars participants, and at the end of almost every webinar, I would receive direct messages either on the Zoom itself while in the webinar or on LinkedIn. And the stories all had a similar narrative, which was, I feel so lonely, I'm disconnected, the people around me don't get me, I feel misunderstood. And I started to collect these stories in my head, and then I started writing them in the book. But then life got in the way because COVID, I was extremely busy. In 2022, my dad started to fall sick. And so that was shelved, but it was always in my computer. I actually had a book strategist in 2022 who pulled out all my LinkedIn writing and podcasts and put everything in a document. So I had a lot of raw material, but nobody to organize it. It was daunting. I'm like, this is not the right time, right? And then last year I went to Brisbane for a speakers convention. And for some reason, it was such a soulful convention. I cried so many times, even though most of the time our speakers' conventions are very learner-oriented. This one was like, there was so much heart, there was so much soul, and something in me just unlocked.
Mm.
And I came back, and my first thought was, I need to get that book out now. Right? And so that was like how the book came to fruition. The process of writing the book has been, wow, I think it's like I write a bit and there's an intellectual part of me, right? I think many high achievers lean on the head and the intellect because it feels like you're in control, become very high in your expertise.
Yep.
And I still like that part of me, but that was where I started because it was safe to go there. But as I was writing and reflecting on my years of being a speaker, what really gets to people is seldom the brainy stuff. It's often the stories and the emotional connection of feeling seen. And that was the feedback that people always told me, Sha-En, the story you told me spoke to me. I do not feel alone anymore. And that was how I switched from being so intellectual with all the jargon and diagrams into storytelling about my life, right? And it's hard because, you know, my parents have never had a good relationship, and yet so much of my current existence is driven by that. And the process would be like, I write the full story and then I'm like, it's like I cry. Then I need to take lots of deep breaths to get back into my own window. And then I continue, right? And then a few days later, I'll look back at the story and then I would ask, what would they think if they read it? And I found myself going into that people pleasing again, right? Maybe I need to be harmonious. Maybe my mom will say a lot of things if I put it out there. But I went back to, why am I writing this book? I'm writing for these stories to get out there.
So how much did you edit to protect the people that you love?
Yeah, it's a hard balance, and I edited not to erase the truth, but because I've also processed it a lot. And so I don't write from blame, resentment, or anger anymore. I write from recognition of what they had or didn't have, resources or wherewithal or awareness. And so I edited based on that lens. And they're still alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Perhaps if they were no longer around, maybe the real truth could come out. I don't know. I often think about it. I do think about it. But at the same time, I think about me being a mom right now and the tons of mistakes that I've made. And I ask myself, what would I want my children to think of my own journey? And I use that as a very good guiding force, right? I am a daughter writing about her parents, and what would it be if my daughters wrote about me, right? So that helped me a lot, right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting take on it, because obviously, you know, I think you know what my book is about, and it was a very difficult, I think that was probably the hardest piece to straddle, right?
Yeah, that's really hard.
So how do you tell your truth, protect the people you love, but also make it about the reader, right? Because I think for me, that guiding, like you said, your guiding principle is, I'm writing as a mother, how would I want my children to see this, right? I think for me, the guiding principle became really, what is the purpose of telling this part of the story?
Yes, agree.
And how has it really shaped communication in my life? Like, there are people who had big reactions to the book because they felt like they deserved a bigger part in the story and that they didn't get as much space or mention, right? But for me, that was much less important because it didn't feed into the communication piece and what is the purpose of the book. And the purpose of the book is for the reader to feel seen, through the stories, through the understanding, so and to take apart their own communication patterns. So tell me the name of the book. Do we have a final title?
Yes, so it's called I Miss Feeling Like Me. And the subtagline is A Path to Feeling Whole and Alive Again.
I can't wait to read it. I cannot wait to read it.
So excited.
You know, you said you cried a lot as you were writing each chapter. What emotional patterns surfaced for you as you were writing that?
Wow, I was writing about this story, finding myself in the living room of my old house, and it was empty except for me. And my sister had left after, I guess, putting up with my parents for so long. And being that small child, I was just 14, being that teenager, when I started to recall that, I think I've always logically said, it's fine that she left because I know what it was like to feel pain and walk away. But I hadn't yet processed that meant that I was all alone in facing them.
So was there some form of resentment that she got away from it, or?
I don't think it was resentment per se. It was more like loneliness. Yeah, I felt really lonely having to fend for all this myself. And the part I hadn't processed was that I had given her the benefit of the doubt that it was painful to walk away. But I hadn't helped myself to say that, man, it was lonely.
Yeah.
And it was hard. And I just, I masked it away. It's like, it's okay. I can do it. And I did it. I did everything was necessary in the hopes. And this was the part also that I wrote in the book. And the hope, and I didn't realize it until I wrote it, was that I hoped that by being that person, that by bringing the harmony back into the house, that she would come back. Yeah. So that part, oh my God, I think every time I read it, I cry because I didn't realize that I was doing that. But good on 14-year-old me, right?
Yeah.
Because I wanted her to come back because we are a team, we are allies. Why am I here by myself?
What is your relationship like today?
With my sister? We get along really well. And, and because of so much that has happened in the last 30 years, I've also talked to her a lot. We've talked through this, and we're in a good space. Yeah. It has actually, our relationship has always been good. So we always joke.
But your relationship has it always been good because you kept giving her the benefit of the doubt and kept sort of making excuses, for want of a better word, for the fact that she left? Or has the relationship actually always been good?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose I still am giving some excuses. Yeah, and I guess a part of me is also still protective. And the reason for that is that now that I see my own daughter, and the funny part is that my children are also 5 years apart. And my elder daughter is very open about what it means to be an elder daughter. And I'm a younger kid. So I get it, but I don't get it at the same time. But yet I assume the role.
Yeah.
Partially, right? So yes, I would think that there's still some parts that is protective, some parts that is maybe creating excuses. But I also see that her life is very different from mine. And she has been through a lot in her life. And that's so have I. Right? So it's good insofar that we are united towards a common goal.
Yeah.
Yep. The irony of it all. But that she sees me and I see her. She has never once tried to change me, never once tried to... I often think, what if, does she look at me as this high achieving person and just ticking all those boxes? How does she feel looking at me? I often wonder. Yeah, we have not gotten to that kind of conversation.
How does little Sha-En feel looking at you today? And what does happiness mean to you today? And what are you still learning about yourself today?
I think younger Sha-En would say that I've done a really good job of life and that I'm very brave and courageous to want to unpack all this, because it could be so easy not to, right? Could just do whatever other things apart from going down this journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, happiness now is not about that effusive, bubbly. I mean, I am, but that feels more natural to me than the fake things that I used to do. And to me, it's more about a sense of peace, a sense of self-knowing, a trust in who I am. And that allows me to be authentic. Because if I'm really happy, I'm showing it. If I'm not happy, I'm not showing it.
Yeah.
And in the past, it was just kind of one
Yeah.
one color palette.
But being the happiness scientist, is there ever an expectation from people that you should be happy all the time? Oh
yes, all the time.
Yeah.
People always ask me, are you always happy? And then I'm like, who is always happy?
Yeah.
And so I've always been very particular in my comms to anybody, writing, speaking, that I'm only just a human being. And a human being has a whole range of emotions. And in fact, it is the emotions that bring color to life.
Yep.
And because of sadness, you can feel joy. Because of grief, you can feel love, right? And
so true.
And I think that to me is the way that I frame the happiness, right? And that has also led to the evolution of the work that I'm doing now. Right?
As we wrap, Sha-En, I want to ask you one final question. What does speaking human mean to you?
It means that we speak to the person and maybe sometimes even the person's and parts inside that person. Right? And recognizing that we all come from somewhere. We all have many stories in our head. And we are just doing the best that we can every single day. And I think that will bring out that humanity in all of us.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sha-En. And thank you for being
having
with me today. I think what really stood out to me is just the ways that so many of us have learned to survive, to be impressive, agreeable, highly functioning, emotionally controlled.
Yeah.
And these survival patterns are not always in alignment with who we are today. And I think so many people reach that point where they realize that, you know, I'm done performing and I don't really want to be this way. I want to feel whole.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience and your stories to bring honesty, nuance and humanity into this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being with us on the Speaking Human podcast. I'm Dr. Damini. At the end of each podcast, we do get each of our guests to choose a charity of their choice. You will find the information for the chosen charity in the information section for this episode. Thank you for being with us once again, and thank you, Sha-En.
Thank you.